Pugad Vloggers.
Ayan, good evening mga kapugad. This is Attorney Darwin Cañete. Ako po yung host nyo tonight, Wednesday, dito sa Pugad Vloggers. Kami po ay daily program, weekdays, Monday to Friday, dito sa DZRJ 8:10 AM. We are live stream also on Facebook. Makikita nyo rin po kami. And then we are also on cable, channel 224. And we also have a live cast, no? Simulcast dito po sa YouTube. No? You will see the address at the crawler. And tonight, napaka-special ng ating episode ngayon because we will be in the company of one of the greatest intellectuals right now that I know personally. And I'm fortunate to share ideas with him because he's very smart guy. This guy is not only one of our talented OFW, so alam mo niya experience ng pagiging OFW. He is also an entertainer and also one of the leading intellects behind this movement called correct movement, no? He is also one of our intellectual exports to Singapore. He's an IT project manager, no? So multi-talented and multi-skilled talaga, to be honest, very rare individual. And I'm proud to call him my friend, Mr. Orion Perez Dumdum. Thank you. Good evening, Orion.
Good evening, Attorney Darwin. So, kumusta kayo dyan?
Mabuti naman. Oo, salamat at pinaunlakan mo yung invitation ko na magkonting palitan tayo ng ideas.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for inviting din.
Thank you. So anyway, the reason why, for those of you who do not know Mr. Orion, meron po siyang Facebook page. No? We are, of course, Pugad Vloggers, so we are more concerned on what is happening in social media. And one of the leading pages natin dito, political pages and social pages, is of course the correct movement. No? Ano yung correct movement? Well, our guest will explain that, but he has a page in Facebook. Yung mga gusto dyan na magbasa tungkol sa pwedeng gawin natin bilang mamamayan and for changes in our society, like, share din po kayo doon, or you can sign up for that Facebook page. Anyway, we will have Sir, my friend Orion explain, no? Sir, what is correct movement para sa mga hindi nakakilala?
Ayun. Thanks, Fiscal Darwin. No? Itong correct movement is basically, yung correct is short form for constitutional reform and rectification for economic competitiveness and transformation.
Mhm.
So, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito ay pagbabago ng ating saligang batas para maging economically competitive ang Pilipinas at ma-transform tayo for the better. So kung ano man yung mga dysfunctions ng sistema natin, marami diyan kasi traceable to the system that we're using, which is defined in the Constitution. So yun, kung may mga mali, kailangan ayusin. Yung may mga palpak, baguhin. Yan.
Why have you bakit naisip nyo Constitution ang problem talaga ng Pilipinas, sir, as far as your group is concerned?
Naisip namin yun kasi partly a lot of it had to do with my own personal experience sa Singapore, no? Kasi madalas when growing up sa Pilipinas, paminsan napapaisip ang mga tao, lalo na't mga Pilipino, na baka Pilipino yung mga problema, baka tayo mismo, ang kultura natin, tayo. And I noticed na merong mga ganyang issues. And then, pero teka lang, let's dig deeper. Saan ba nagsimula yung mga ganyang, kumbaga, cultural issues natin? Something to do with the environment, something to do with the system that runs our society. Kaya nagkakaroon ng mga ganitong, the way we act, it's because the way the system was set up. So I did my research on that, and I found that may mga issues talaga yung Constitution natin. And why did I end up thinking like this? Was because I observed Singapore. And I looked at Singapore, sabi ko, nung una kong pumunta ng Singapore as a visitor lang, sabi ko, barok-barok sila mag-Ingles, maraming tao dito, napaka-unsophisticated nga ng kanilang third world din talaga yung attitude ng maraming tao dito dati, and until now, in fact, no? So sabi ko, bakit mas mahusay nga ang mga Pilipino sa maraming bagay? It became very clear na in many cases, we are acknowledged to be very talented in many, many areas, no? So para bang, ano ba yung naging rason? And especially in the 1960s or even 1950s, sabi ko, ang history ng Singapore, kumbaga, uneducated ng mga Singaporean dati. Tapos maraming no read, no write. O bakit sila nagkaroon ng mga magagaling na leader? Bakit sila pumipili ng mga magagaling na leader? Kung uneducated ng mga tao, nakita ko yung sistema pala nila iba. Naka-parliamentary system sila. So, hindi nagiging pasikatan contest na nagiging yung mga... Kasi kung naka-presidential system sana sila, dito sa Singapore, ang mga naging pangulo sana dito, kung hindi sila naka-parliamentary system, magiging pangulo dito mga cabaret singer, mga soccer player, mga aktor, mga singer, ganun ang mangyayari. Mga parang, they would have fallen into the same parang trap that we have in the Philippines na nagiging celebrity-based yung pagpili ng sino magiging leader. If they had the same system in Singapore, it would have turned out like that. But lucky for them, naka-parliamentary system sila.
We're talking about the 1986 Constitution because we've
1987, yes, the 1987 Constitution.
Okay, we had three. So you had the opportunity to study two prior constitutions to the 1987.
Yes.
So we have the 1935, we have the Marcos Constitution.
Yes,
1933. Were there any features from the previous constitution na sa tingin mo na hindi na carry over na maganda dito sa 1987?
Yes. So in 1987, kasi they introduced a lot of weird stuff. So basically, the 1987 Constitution was supposed to be some kind of a reboot towards the 1935 Constitution. And in so doing, they rebooted and then they did some modifications. So the original 1935 Constitution featured a Mexican-style presidency, which is 6 years, single term.
Okay.
But then in 1939 or 1940, nagkaroon ng amendments to the Constitution that allowed, para kumbaga binago nila, imbis na single 6-year term, ginawa nilang 4-year terms na pwedeng mag-re-elect. So magiging 8, parang US.
Yes.
So yeah, the original 1935, the unamended original 1935 Constitution was unicameral. And so there was no Senate. It was only a House of Representatives.
One legislative body.
One body only. And they had a single 6-year term for the president. And then there was these amendments that happened a few years later. Just a few years later, So kumbaga 4 years lang, 4 or 5 years lang. And then they had these changes which then caused it from 6-year term, single 6-year term, naging 2 4-year terms. Pwede. Plus, nagkaroon sila yung sinasabi nating 24 senators voted at large. So they had those changes. And what happened is when we had the 1987 Constitution, they decided, let's reboot, but then we will have the Senate. They will retain the Senate. That was added on, but they will retain the single 6-year term presidency. And in so doing, and then worse, they added all kinds of term limits that have actually disrupted the political life or the political rhythm that used to exist. So in the past, under the 1935 Constitution, because it was possible for a good performing mayor, a good performing senator to continue on as long as he was always performing, as long as people liked him, he would continue on in office. No? Right now, nangyayari, kahit mayor ka, ang galing-galing mo, pagka third term mo, pagkatapos ng 9 years mo, tuloy-tuloy, sorry ka na lang, kahit gusto ng mga tao sa'yo, hindi ka na pwede. And that brings about new problems because meron kang mga project na hindi pa tapos, you now want your legacy to continue. So who are you going to trust to continue that? Usually, you will get a relative. who will also be able to benefit from the fact na pareho kayo ng apelyido, di ba? So,
yes, okay.
mananalo yon. So this actually exacerbated the problem of dynasties.
Mhm.
In fact, there is a study coming from Pablo, his name is Pablo Kerubin. No, he's a
Mhm.
Colombian political scientist, no, PhD, and he made this study, and this study was nakatutok sa Philippines,
Mhm.
and he was interested in the Philippines because we have the same issues in Latin America. No, he's from Colombia, where they also have term limits in some countries in Latin America, particularly Mexico. So he studied the situation in the Philippines. Nakita niya, nung wala pa kayong term limit sa Pilipinas, you actually did not have that many dynasties.
Mhm.
If you did have dynasties, it's a sunod-sunod dynasty, yung tinatawag nilang thin dynasty.
Mhm.
Tatay, pag natapos na, nag-retire na talaga siya, as in he really totally retired, anak ang magko-continue. Pero isa lang anak, siya lang.
Mhm.
Under the 1987 Constitution, it was proven that in many cases, nagsimula ang tatay, after the 9 years natapos siya, he moved to another position and his son continued.
Mhm.
After 9 years, both of them were continued into different positions, and someone else from the family took over the original position. So naging tatlo sila after 27 years. Parang
Wow.
yun yung nangyari na parang it just kept on nanganganak dahil sa term limits.
Mhm.
And there were many other dysfunctions that have been mentioned by other political scientists, usually from outside the Philippines, who've been observing the Philippines. So there's a Japanese professor named Yuko Kasuya,
Mhm.
PhD ren, and she also said it was the term limits introduced in 1987 that disrupted the party system. So imbis na dati meron tayong mostly two main parties and then other parang so-called fringe parties, ang nangyari dahil sa nagkaroon ng one term only,
Mhm.
nangyari dyan, yung imbis na dalawang main parties lang, ang maraming nagsusulputang mga parties.
Mhm.
So, nawala yung continuity. Tapos, her explanation for this is, in the past, takot yung mga challengers na ma-split yung vote at
Mhm.
mananalo na naman yung incumbent. So, the incumbent, because he is the president, he's the incumbent, and he can run again, all the challengers, they decide to consolidate na lang. So they will not field so many candidates. There will only be one main candidate from a main party that will challenge the main incumbent.
Okay.
So, yun ang nangyari.
Your Facebook page has many opinions. Actually, I get to read them. Very interesting. And there are times na you yourself write, no?
Yes.
Okay. So, sa 1987, Constitution, you basically split. Ano yung problema nito? Okay, so what are the main problems na nakikita nyo sa 1987 Constitution? We've already talked about term limits as a problem.
The term limits, yeah, that added it.
What do you think are the other provisions na problematic sa 1987 Constitution?
So, the nationalistic restrictive economic provisions in the Constitution, those have to go, because those are unfortunately making us very uncompetitive compared to the rest of Southeast Asia. So pag nagkakaroon ng yung nag-aakit ng mga investors na pumasok sa bansa, natatalo lagi ang Pilipinas kumpara sa mga Thailand, sa mga Vietnam, sa Malaysia, sa Singapore, and everywhere else. Malaysia, they do very well because they don't have any anti-foreign investment restrictions in their constitution.
Okay,
Tayo,
we're
meron.
talking about restrictions. What particular provisions sa tingin mo ang anti-progressive doon sa constitution that really hampered our economic growth?
You'll find them in our Article 12. Basically, they're the ones found in Article 12. And in Article 12, so there's Article 12, Section 10, ganyan, etc. And marami sila, several of them. Mga 60-40, as well as outright talagang binaban ang mga foreign investors na pumasok. So parang it's basically a signal to the rest of the world na ayaw namin kayong pumasok. Parang ganun
yung
lumalabas.
When you say 60-40, this is, we're referring natin sa ownership.
Ownership,
cap.
yeah.
Dapat 60% Pinoy,
Filipino.
40% everybody else.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So there are certain protected industries na hindi pwedeng ibang magmay-ari kundi Pinoy.
Yes, yes.
Okay, let's see the reason for, you understand the reasoning behind those provisions ba?
Yes,
How did it
I
come
do.
about?
So they came about it. Actually, it's like this. Kasi nga, the Philippines has basically been coming from a very parang takutin tayo na bansa eh. Parang we're afraid, we don't have confidence in ourselves. We don't know how good we actually are, and we are afraid that we cannot compete against foreigners. And so what's happened is, back in 1935, meron ng ganyan, pero limited only yung mga constitutional restrictions na yan to public utilities. So yung 60-40 before was only for public utilities and maybe extraction of natural resources. But in 1987, that was expanded to be, nagkaroon tayo ng restrictive provision that says that Congress will regularly create laws that will restrict or limit the ownership of to ganyan in certain industries. So pag nakikita kasi ng mga foreign investors yung na yan, yung particular provision na yan sa constitution, parang feeling nila posibleng ang industry ko ay currently okay pumasok sa Pilipinas. But we don't know, next year baka biglang masama yung industry namin na biglang hindi na pwede. For example, video game makers, okay silang pumasok kasi hindi sila kasama dun sa restricted list, sa or sa negative list, no? But we don't know, bigla na lang next time magkaroon ng bagong law na sasabihin, yung mga video game companies dapat 60% owned na yan ng Pilipino. So biglang nagbago. And that's because it's found in the Constitution that Congress must, parang kumbaga regularly must define new industries that are to be included in that list. So parang it's to them it's a sort of Damocles na right now pasok kami pero we don't know, baka next year or 2 years from now bigla na lang hindi na kami pwede. So yun yung reason talaga bakit sila kumbaga they're wary of coming to the Philippines.
But the Duterte administration, as recent as this year, passed the Public Service Act. Maraming na-open up na industries that lifted the restrictions that you just mentioned. In some cases,
indeed
allowed 100%. Isn't that a cure already?
It is a workaround. That is so what was done was basically a workaround. It is better than nothing. It is a workaround, but it's still, unfortunately, there's always that hanging feeling among other companies na baka masama kami. Kasi for example, the Public Services Act, what it basically does is it redefines companies that are normally, or sectors that are normally considered to be public utilities to become considered public services. So may dalawang bucket eh. There's bucket of public utilities and public services. Yung public utilities are totally hindi pwede na maging 100% owned by foreigners because that's what the Constitution says.
Okay.
So the Constitution says bawal ang mga anything that is a public utility hindi pwede. And traditionally telecoms, water, etc. are considered public utilities. With the Public Service Act, this is basically an amendment of the original Public Service Act, na nasama ngayon yung mga telecoms and a few other industries that are normally considered utilities as public services at hindi na sila kasama sa utilities and therefore pwede sila.
Okay.
So parang nagkaroon ng workaround. However, the problem is that there are still cases where biglang nagkakaroon ng mga unscrupulous lawsuits that are tawag nito hinahain or sinasampal versus certain companies na foreign owned. Tapos ang ginagawa sa complaint, sinasabi, yung company na yan is operating a public utility. I'll give an example. Number one was FedEx. FedEx was nagkaroon ng complaint against FedEx and it even reached the the Court of Appeals, and ang sinabi sa Court of Appeals is they are in violation of the Constitution because they are operating a public utility daw. FedEx. FedEx is not really a public utility. They are just a courier company, di ba? But yun yung problema, no? Nasa para bang because they were not defined as either a utility or a service, na ano sila, parang nandun sila sa gray zone na somehow some judge or some fiscal somewhere interpreted it such that oo nga, no, they are a utility, nagkaroon ng kaso, tapos the judge said yes, yeah, it's true, na ganun sila. Another example is angkas. Angkas, the habal-habal motorcycle,
riding service, yes.
Riding service. Now, technically speaking, what's this? They are actually a tech company. They are a tech startup, no?
Because it's the app that really
they are an app.
Connecting.
Yeah, they are actually an app. They are an app provider.
Yes.
They are not a fleet
wala silang inventory
operator
ng vehicles. Wala silang
empleyado. Di sila empleyado. But for some reason, may naghain ng kaso rin against them na Singaporean yung may-ari, si Angeline Tam, she's Singaporean, she owns majority of the shares. Hindi pwede kasi public utility yan. And then, buti na lang, ang asawa ni Angeline is a Filipino. Ay, di sinabi niya, sige, walang problema. Kay George na lang, si George Royeca, yung kanyang asawa. Yan na lang, para walang issue. O yan. Tapos ngayon, the fact is, they're not, technically speaking, they are not a fleet operator.
Yes.
They are not, they don't employ those drivers. Those drivers are their partners, di ba? And all that. So, parang, that's the problem eh. Because of the 1987 Constitution's, yung particular clause na yan, ginagamit, inaabuso siya ng ilang mga unscrupulous people.
Nawe-weaponize
siya.
Nawe-weaponize against people who are making money and our local counterparts want to
sabotage them
para sila ang kumita.
Yes, that's what's happening. So parang ginagamit yung law na yan in not necessarily for parang telecom versus telecom. Hindi, paminsan sa mga maliliit eh. So mga courier company, porket yun nga, yung FedEx courier company, ginawang public utility daw siya.
But isn't that a fair thing? Lupa natin, we are in our own country. Shouldn't we have a built-in advantage as natives over any foreign investor, or do you have a different
Actually, so we do. We do already have a native advantage because we speak the language. We know the place. It's our. It's we have home court advantage kahit anong gawin, no? So by that alone, we already have an advantage. Now, ang point ko is there's no reason to put it in the Constitution because other countries, they don't have these kinds of things in their Constitution.
Actually, magandang
they have it in their law.
Magandang napansin mo yun eh. Among the many constitutions, like the US Constitution, it's a very, very bare document.
It's bare.
Yung the essentials.
Essentials lang, yes.
The details are left to whoever, the legislature, because we don't know what the future needs of the country are.
Yes, that's right.
You fill in the details because you don't know what the new needs of people in the future will have. Sa atin, at the very beginning, micromanage based on the provisions na dapat gawin mo yung direction.
Yes.
So, since that is the philosophy of the 1987 Constitution, that you have to do this thing in a certain way from the structure. Are we talking about surgery na we just take out certain parts, or we just scrap the whole thing and start all over again?
Originally, I was in favor of a more surgical approach. Natanggalin mo yung mga ganito. But, after you notice na ang daming kailangan baguhin, it's reached the point na parang, alam mo, sa sobrang daming kailangan baguhin na lang kaya natin yung buo.
Okay.
Let's start because it was very faulty talaga siya. It was hurriedly done, and the guys who wrote it, they did not have the ability to do the research that they needed to do that we now have kasi may Google na tayo ngayon. We have internet access na.
Yes.
We can easily search stuff nowadays. Back then in 1986 when they were writing it for 4 months, they didn't have that that luxury. They didn't have the technology back then. They were just given a very short amount of time, come up with something, and they came up with something in a very reactive way. Ayaw namin ng mga Marcoses. We have to do something that will prevent the Marcoses. Blah blah blah,
And
etc.
right now, it looks like that one job hindi nila kayang gawin.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
The entire
Nakakagatin sila.
purpose of the 1987 was to stop another Marcos. And look what's happening now.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So kitang-kita na lahat, 'di ba? Anong mangyayari ngayon? O 'di ba, nakakatawa eh. Oh, hindi niyo nagawa, hindi niyo nagampanan yung ano niyo.
You had one job.
You had one job. Hindi niyo nagawa. Wala talaga. So, you know,
Okay, so we're talking about starting from scratch. Let's say kung rat infested ng yung bahay, better to burn it down and build
start anew.
foundations.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. There are many, of course, variations of the structure of government you're talking about. Of course, you know, like orifices, everybody has one.
Yeah,
Di ba?
yeah, exactly.
So your particular model of structural change will start with system of government. What do you have in mind, sir?
I have something in mind that is based on some of the favorite countries that Filipinos like to migrate to.
Yes.
Okay. So that would, and those two main countries would be countries using the federal parliamentary system. That would be Australia and Canada. Originally, long ago, a lot of people would have said the US, but obviously there are real major problems with the US. They are also beginning to have the same problems that we have in the Philippines and the same problems that Latin America has because of the presidential system. And plus other issues that they have. Kaya nga ang dami nilang mass shootings ngayon. To be honest, maybe it's not a good model to really copy anymore. So therefore,
we don't want to be the brown American brother.
yeah, we shouldn't. In fact, Claro M. Recto said that before, back in the late 1940s, early 1950s. It was he who was originally campaigning for a shift to the presidential system, and he basically shift to the parliamentary system. Sorry,
because I was remembering Eli Pamatong eh. He wanted us to be the statehood USA. Gusto niyang, if we're gonna ape the Americans, we might as well be part of their federal system, no?
We had this bit well joined.
The late Eli Pamatong, what a character! But
what a character, Spike, the Spike man.
The Spike man. Okay, let's go to your your Australian. Anong features ng Australian model that you like?
So the Australian model and just the Australian model and the Canadian model, they're very, very similar.
Okay.
They're very similar. They're basically both federal parliamentary. The nomenclatures are somewhat similar in some places and different in others. So for example, yung parang kasi meron silang mga subnational governments eh. Sa Pilipinas, we call our subnational territories regions. Sa Canada, they call them provinces. In Australia, they call them states. Now, in their case, the mini prime minister, kasi kumbaga may prime minister at the national level or the federal level, and at the state or provincial level, they call them the premier.
Okay.
No? Now, so they're very similar in that respect, and it's I like the way they have their system kasi yung system nila means they don't have everything in one place, diba? So parang nasi-spread out nga yung kanilang development. So you don't talk only about Canberra nga, which is in Australia,
okay,
diba?
So we start with the fact na sa atin unitary. We have a president, we have the Senate, the Congress. Sa Australia, the head of state is not the president.
In Australia, the head of state, at the moment, they're still a monarchy. They're still under the British ceremonially. Yes. Yeah,
pero
ceremonially.
As a modern state, structural nila, the head of state, for theoretical purposes, kasi sa ceremonial lang naman yung queen eh, is the prime minister.
No, they have a governor general.
They have a governor general.
So the governor general is a local Australian or a local Canadian in Canada who is basically appointed by the government and then parang nagkakaroon ng investiture by the queen.
So hindi direct this governor is not directly elected like the presidency.
No, he's not. Now, in the Philippines, we don't need to follow that.
Mhm.
We can still have a president who is elected,
Mhm.
but his or her functions will mostly still be ceremonial.
Parang French.
Parang, well, in the case of France, kasi in France, elected yung kanilang president, but he's not ceremonial. He is the main
Okay.
mover,
Okay.
the main
Okay.
mover. But in other countries like Ireland, for example, in Ireland, they actually do, or even in Singapore, they elect whoever is going to be the main, the president.
So
But this president is mostly
may-
ceremonial.
may main election on president. Okay.
Yes.
Sa cabinet niya, siya mamimili. Sa legislature, what would be the composition? Philippine, if you were going to transplant the concept to the Philippines, ano yung parliament natin or legislature?
Yeah. So the parliament, we can then have a parliament. Basically, we can still call them the House of Representatives, because in Australia they also call it House of Representatives for their lower house, and they also call their upper house Senate. The difference is the way it works.
Okay.
So in Australia, or even in Canada they call it the House of Commons, patterned after the British. The lower house basically is the more powerful house.
Okay.
So doon sa lower house nanggagaling yung prime minister.
Mhm.
And basically the prime minister is the head. He is the leader of the party or the bloc that gets a majority of seats within the lower house. And then
Okay.
the cabinet is formed by the prime minister. Basically, he gets who are the best people within his party, the mga senior members within the party, and based on yung anong mga expertise nila, kukunin niya yung mga yan. So that's how both systems in Canada and Australia
But
work.
in your concept of legislature, konsepto mo, walang equivalent ng Senate? Or is there something like the House
I'm
of the
open
Lords?
to have a Senate. I'm okay with having a Senate. But the difference is the Senate in the Philippine version of the parliamentary system, the Senate will be, number one, it'll be weaker than the lower house. The lower house will be the more powerful house. The Senate will basically be a house of review. And the Senate must be composed of people brought in by the regions rather
So,
than
hindi at large.
hindi at large.
Hindi
Yeah.
at large. Yung national,
Yes.
kung sinong artista nakilala mo
Ayun.
bansa, yun naman nanalo.
Oo,
Rather,
oo.
you pick the local famous guy. At least may representation ka on the level of the Senate.
Yes.
Okay, the concept mo with respect to federal, kasi parliament, we already made the national structure.
Oo.
The aspect na tina-champion ng movement mo is federal. Explain how
Federal
that would
parliamentary.
be, yeah. How that would happen in the Philippines. Federal.
So in the Philippines, we would need to gradually become federal. We would become federated in a gradualist fashion, because right now, obviously, naka-unitary tayo. Now, what we're going to do is we will follow the best route for that is to follow the Spanish model.
Okay.
In Spain, in 1978, they came up with a constitution that basically said, okay, lahat kayo mga probinsya, and the reason why I'm saying Spain is because the way the Philippines is structured is identical to how Spain is structured. The Philippines has the Philippines, underneath the Philippines, regions, and under the regions, you have the provinces. Ganun din yung Spain. España, regiones, provincias. So, ganun sila. So, tayo, ang gagawin natin, gagayahin natin kung ano yung ginawa rin ng Spain, which is they told the provinces na kayong mga provinces na magkakalapit, na medyo pare-pareho yung kultura nyo, magsama kayo based on what you think works for you.
Mhm.
Form your regions accordingly, and then we will give you autonomy. We will make you autonomous regions.
But aren't we too small for that kind of partition? Sabi nila kasi we are, this works for those areas kasi malalaki sila geographically.
We're bigger than okay. So actually, we're much ganito kasi federalism works for countries that are ethno-linguistically and or geographically fragmented.
Okay.
We are ethno-linguistically fragmented. That's a given. We are also geographically fragmented because we are an archipelago, and even some of our islands are divided because of mountain ranges inside that divide ethnic groups from each other. So we are actually ripe for that. In fact, some of the most federalized countries in the world are even smaller than us. So there are countries like Austria. That country is federal. They've been a federation for a long time. They're smaller than us. Switzerland. Yeah.
Akala ko mas malaki tayo. Mas
We're-
malaki sila.
Mas malaki ang Pilipinas kaysa sa Austria. We're not talking about Australia. Ha? I'm talking about Austria.
Yeah, in Europe.
Europe, yeah. We are much bigger than they are. Yes, geographically. We are much, much, much bigger than Switzerland. And Switzerland is also another country that is ethno-linguistically and geographically fragmented. Small nga sila, no? Small. Pero mountainous. Mountainous naman. Dami mga mountain ranges that cut people across. Basically, may isang area dito na German ang salita, isang area dito na Romance ang salita, isang area dito Italiano ang salita, isang area dito French ang salita. So, dahil doon, and malalayo pa nga. Parang sobrang disconnected nila dahil nga sa mga mountain ranges. They had to do federalism there, even though they are considered a small country.
Based on what you said, this movement is not new. Ilang taon na rin kayo?
We started in late 2010. Yeah.
2010s, right.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure before kayo, marami din ang nagka-idea na, we need to change the constitution to conform
Yes.
whatever, di ba? So, ano yung nangyayari? The movement, in order to make constitutional change, anong path ang tinitingnan natin to get it moving? Where are we going
Sa amin, at least kami sa Correct Movement, ang aming path towards doing that is an educational campaign. Kasi na-notice namin na ever since, ang daming kumukontra sa charter change, kontra sila ng kontra, kasi hindi nila naintindihan. So, I set out back in 2010 to educate people about what's wrong with the 1987 Constitution and what needs to be done to fix it. So, it's really all about spreading the word, spreading the knowledge, spreading information para yung mga tao mamulat. Kasi dati, puro misinformation at disinformation ang nangyayari. Puro fake news ang lumalabas. Masama yan. Pag term extension yan. Pag federalism, mas mahal ang taxes. Ganyan. Tapos, based on our studies.
There were other politicians before who said, okay, ASCON, CONCON, or whatever combination. And walang nangyayari. There was no traction. That's what happened, if I recall correctly.
And that happened largely because they did not focus first on the aspect of educating the people.
Okay.
So it was always parang i-move na natin sa Kongreso. Pero hindi naiintindihan ng mga tao. So fake news lagi ng mga oligarchs na may-ari ng mga TV station at ng mga newspaper. So parang ayaw ng mga oligarch. Usually ang tunay na understanding ko dito, yung mga oligarch na yan, takot sila na tatanggalin yung 60-40.
Okay.
Kasi gusto nila sila lang ang magmomonopolya eh. They want to own the businesses only. So they don't want to remove the 60-40. So pag nagsalita na ang ilang mga politiko na gusto ng reforms na, let's say, let's fix the constitution para magkaroon tayo ng parliamentary system, tututulan talaga nila yan. Because once nag-usap na about pagbabago ng constitution, masasama lagi yung pagtanggal ng 60-40. Yun ang hindi gusto talaga ng mga oligarchs. Kasi gusto ng oligarchs na sila lang ang magkakaroon ng monopolyo sa Pilipinas.
There has been various presidencies that has done this. Ramos, if I remember correctly, and also GMA.
Yes, that's right. And even ERAP. Even ERAP tried. Even ERAP tried. He had this thing called Concord, which he started in, I think it was in 2000, the year 2000 is when he started in, talking about it. The idea was, let's remove the 60-40. Let's remove the anti-foreign direct investment restrictions. Let's allow more investors to come in para magkatrabaho yung mga tao. Now, it looks like some of the oligarchs didn't like this, and they found a reason to get him thrown out. And that's how the whole, yung wetting paybacks, wetting quick kickbacks and all that came to be. So and then there was a reason to throw him out. So he got thrown out. I think he got thrown out largely because he was trying to bring constitutional reform to happen.
Wait, the 1987 Constitution, to be fair, is not totally close to being changed or amended. May provisions dyan. There are many paths to constitutional change. One is, of course, tinatawag na Constitutional Convention.
Yes.
One, of course, is the gradual amendments by way of direct proposal. Dadaan yan through Congress and the Senate, and then magkakaroon ng ratification.
Yeah.
We've had all those paths. Have there any of those paths been undertaken by correct, and saan tayo nagka-problema in
okay, kami sa correct. So hindi kami so ganito, we believe basically that our role in the correct movement is really just to educate the people, to spread the word. And we will connect as much as we can to other people or politicians or whoever who wants to make these reforms happen. So kasi parang kami, di naman kami politiko, ordinaryong tao lang kami, mostly OFW, mostly youth, mostly just ordinary people basically. And kami, parang hindi na kami, we're not the ones who will do these mga signature campaign, ganyan. We work together with people who've done this. So we've collaborated with people like attorney, or rather secretary Lambino, si Raul Lambino. So we're friends with him. We work a lot with him because he has already done these kinds of things. He's been pushing for the exact same reforms that we've been pushing for. Ang niche namin sa correct is the education campaign, basically, to educate other Filipinos bakit tama ang mga reformang ito. Tas ibang tao na yung lalakad diyan sa loob ng Congress or whatever. So ganyan. Kasi lagi namang meron eh. There was always going to be a set of politicians and other activists who want to make it happen. Ang amin is, let's help in educating the people para sumang-ayon sila.
Okay, let's do an autopsy of what happened during the Duterte administration. Hindi naman nag-zero yung movement on constitutional change. In fact, one of the controversies during the term of President Duterte was this called federalismo, although I don't know the marketing. Nagkaroon ako ng problema sa marketing eh. In this administration, there were pushes for constitutional change. There were pushes for amendments. Saan tayo nagka-problema during this term?
Okay. If I may, I believe that part of the problem was, I think, President Duterte could have, or probably should have, started it on day one pa lang. Unfortunately, I think yung first year niya talaga, or at least the first few months, was talagang nakaatutok dun sa drug war.
Yes, okay.
So, nangyari, parang, I was hoping nga na matapos na yung mga brouhaha about the drug war. Pasok na sa 2017, dapat diretso ng pag-uusapan na yung constitutional reform. Hindi rin masyado. It really started happening towards the late part of 2017, and then he parang hurriedly chose who his members of the CONCOM would be.
Yes, okay.
And that happened.
I remember that one. May pinorm na study group.
Yeah.
Okay.
The CONCOM, basically the constitutional commission to amend the so it was an advisory commission. So this group was set up in a very short span of time, and it started in 2018. Now, 2018 was just 1 year before another election. The 2019 midterms, diba? So I felt that's not that much time. So, we're gonna get hit by an election year after this, and hindi na naman siguro mangyayari to. So I feel that siguro dapat mas maaga niyang pinag-usapan to. And kasi dahil nangyari doon, masyadong minadali rin sila rin, actually yung grupo na yon, minadali rin sila. And unfortunately, instead of choosing a large number of PhDs who are, say, economists and political scientists, naging sobrang lawyer heavy. I mean, and I mean no disrespect to you as a lawyer, but
No problem. I've met a lot of dumb lawyers, so no problem.
so
In fact,
but
one is
it's
running. Two actually. One is your favorite.
Oo nga eh. Ay nako. Ay nako. It's like, so I was gonna say, no, kasi ang problema din, the, designing a system is probably not necessarily the kind of, parang the cup of tea of lawyers. It's basically interpreting the law is, but designing a system may not necessarily be that thing, no? So maybe should have been, yun nga, mga political science PhDs and economists. Ganyan. So when you have these kinds of people, they will be able to design a good system, and then maybe the lawyers in the group, who shouldn't be a huge group, but maybe at least maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of the group, they can act as the secretariat who will put these good ideas into the legalese that is necessary to make it, pulido yung kanyang language. But the system design is done by the PhDs.
So
That's the way I feel.
where did it become dead on arrival?
So ito yung nangyari, no? When they designed the Constitution, na outvote yung mga kakaunting PhDs at saka mga tunay na eksperto doon. So for example, are we going to have a parliamentary or a federal or a parliamentary or a presidential system? Nanalo yung presidential. Kasi marami nga dun sa mga tao na nandun were not familiar with the parliamentary system. They did not have time to study it. Minadali sila. In the end result was ang kanilang version was a presidential system. Yung federalism nila hindi masyadong maganda yung pagka-design. Tapos hindi man lang nila tinanggal yung mga 60-40. So, when 4 months yata rin yun eh. Parang ang bilis-bilis din ng kanilang draft. Nung binigay na nila, present nila yung draft na yun doon sa gabinete, kay presidente at doon sa kanyang gabinete. The economic managers, the secretaries of finance, budget, any NEDA, Bangko Sentral, etc. Lahat yung mga nasa economic cluster. Binasa nila, nakita nila, walang kwenta to. Ayoko na itong na to. Hindi nyo tinanggal yung 60-40. Naka-presidential pa kayo. Tapos hindi naka-define yung paano yung fiscal, the financial sharing, etc. ng mabuti. Hindi, parang there were a lot of things that were not done. And this is my problem with not having enough of the economics people in the group. Kasi the economists themselves, when they saw it, parang kulang to sa economic planning. Tapos puro legalist lang pero wala yung economic system, the economic system design wasn't there, and it was not a very efficient system used na parliamentary sana, naging presidential pa rin. So parang to them it was not a very good draft. And so President Duterte, hearing all these complaints from his cabinet, particularly the economic sector, he said, okay, ayusin na lang natin to. I'll call for an IATF that will fix this. So he called for an IATF, which was to be led by the
task force.
interagency task force. He called the DILG to spearhead that. One of the USECs, a friend of mine, si Jonathan Malaya,
yes,
was the one who parang spearheaded that part. And they did, in fact, ask for my help. So I helped out with some of the inputs there. And actually, it was moving okay. No, it was moving pretty okay. Pagdating ng 2019, after the elections, nag-full speed ahead kami. I even joined in Tagaytay, nagkaroon ng DILG workshop. Nandun ako. So we set up everything that needed to be set up para magkaroon ng tamang sistema.
Right. So let's go direct to the
Now,
walang nangyari.
So nangyari, nag-soft launch in late 2019. Pag 2020, magkakaroon na sana nung real launch 2020. What happened? Taal exploded. Taal volcano erupted. And not long after, nagka-COVID. And COVID basically got everyone's attention away from everything else.
Okay.
So that's doon tayo nasira.
Okay.
Natamaan tayo ng COVID.
So all those events, we are now in the middle of the elections.
Yes.
We are going to be electing a new set of people. I'm sure you pick your people who will carry your agenda. Sino yung
Yeah.
mga pro? Not this is not promoting. We're just stating the persons who have genuinely stated that they will follow on truth. Sino yung mga klaro yung position sa ganito?
Okay. So ako, I've come up with a list. Ang main laban talaga is in the Senate. Kasi sa Senate lagi nagkakaroon ng issues eh. Sa Senate lagi binabara yung
Sino bang nambara sa
reforms.
Senate before?
Ay nako, syempre yung mga dilaw, 'di ba?
And in particular who?
Ay nako, si Kiko. Nako. Si Kiko Cuneta.
Why? How did he do that? He was Senate chairman or something?
I don't know why he was the one chosen to be the Senate committee chair on constitutional amendments. Why him of all people? The guy doesn't know anything about systems.
Careful.
He doesn't know anything about systems. I'm sorry to say, he doesn't know anything about systems. So, I mean,
but let's go back to your list. Sino yung mga
list. So I've made a list based on its alphabetical order. So nandyan and it's 14 people, not 12, no?
Not 14, okay.
It put 14 people who have been clearly talking about constitutional reforms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to the listeners. Now you choose the 12 that you like out of the 14. So out of these 14, there's Greco Belgica, there's Brother John Castriciones, Ding Diaz, Larry Gadon, Gringo Honasan, Nurmahal Kiram, Ray Langit, Rodante Marcoleta, Mingita Padilla, Robin Padilla, that's my strongest choice, by the way, Sal Panelo, Astra Pimentel, Manny Piñol, and Gibo Teodoro. So ito sila. So and the one that is the strongest talaga in like talagang every time he comes in front of a camera, he's always talking about constitutional reform, ayusin ang sistema, baguhin ang sistema, Robin Padilla. And I've never been more impressed by someone like him kasi talagang inaral niya talaga, as in inaral niya ang mga sistema. And he's had the chance to live abroad. He lived in Australia before. And he was able to really, that's why he actually understands the system, particularly federal parliamentary, because of his experience there.
Okay, unfortunately, time constraints maganda yung usapan eh. I'd like to extend for another hour eh. Pero again, but okay, so anyway, let's go back to your social media account. So people who want to continue their being informed can
they can go reading. They can go to the correct movement FB page, so it's correct movement, and then they can also go to the website correctphilippines.org.
Okay,
correctphilippines.org.
They have the web page or Facebook lang, they just search, andun naman
sa Facebook, and then they can also go to their browser and then go correctphilippines.org.
How about you? You are, of course,
I'm also Orion Perez D.
Facebook page.
Orion Perez D, and I think a lot of people would know that already.
If you want to look for he blogs, of course, on his personal page. So yung mga gustong mag-follow sa kanyang advocacies, you can. Not only is, of course, people don't know your other career. You are an IT expert. You are also, of course, a consummate entertainer. You do.
Yeah, I do stand-up comedy on the side.
On the side.
Yeah. I do stand-up comedy. It slowed down a bit here in Singapore because of the COVID. But it's picking up again. I mean, I have a gig, basically a corporate gig coming up next month. So yeah, I've had a few shows recently, so yeah, it's a hobby. I don't, my main money is done from my
you
IT,
don't need it. It's more, I think it's more a passion for you. Anyway, 7:55, I'll give you the floor on what you want to say to our listeners, Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. I'm sorry yung mga those who commented on our page, so much information being shared by our guest right now, so I wanted to give him the platform. we can respond later on siguro if there's anybody, I think. But sir, to our listeners, any word that you want to say to them?
Yes. So mga kababayan, so don't hesitate. Punta po kayo sa correctphilippines.org. Pag-aralan po ninyo yung mga articles na nandyan. Punta rin kayo sa Correct Movement FB page. Yung FB page, marami kaming stuff, mga videos in Tagalog din. So basically, we were formed para ma-educate ang maraming tao. Particularly, especially nag-start kami, nung nagsimula kami, gusto namin talagang i-educate muna yung mga supposedly edukadong tao. Kasi ang lumalabas, ang mga edukadong Pilipino, yung pa yung kumukontra. Madalas, ang mga Pilipinong edukado, supposedly mga burgis, mayayaman, yung pa yung kumukontra. Tapos yung mga mahihirap, yung mga OFW na ordinaryong tao lang, yung pa yung mas nakakaintindi tungkol sa mga reforma na kailangan baguhin pala. So, parang mas impressed nga ako sa maraming mga ordinaryong tao kasi kita nila na kailangan talaga ng mga pagbabago. Tapos yung pa kung sino yung mga maraming mga pinag-aralan, yung pa yung mga paminsan mayayabang eh. Alam ko na yan eh. Hindi natin kailangan yan. Ang dami nilang satsat, ang dami nilang mga excuse. Pero yun, maraming impormasyon akong nabibigay at marami rin kaming na-convert. At alam na nila ngayon na kailangan pala natin ng mga reformang ito para pumasok ang mas maraming investor, para dumami mga trabaho sa Pilipinas. Actually, yung po mga kababayan dito sa Singapore, ang dami dito foreign investors. Yun po yung nagpayaman sa Singapore. Hindi na si Lee Kuan Yew, sabi niya, wala na tayong pakialam sino may-ari ng kumpanya, basta't magkatrabaho yung mga tao. Ganyan dapat sa atin. Kasi sa atin sa Pilipinas, ang dami mga pamilya na nagkakawatak-watak, nagkakahiwalay dahil nanay nasa Hong Kong bilang maid, ang tatay construction worker sa Saudi, ang mga anak lumalaking walang gabay.
Right. Oh, okay, I'm sorry,
Diba?
7:58, we have to close the program. Thank you so much, Orion, for giving us your precious time to share your ideas and advocacies dito sa Pugad Vloggers. At sa mga nakikinig sa inyo, salamat sa pag-join sa atin. I'd like to greet our co-hosts, of course, na wala dito, Maricar, Attorney Tom Berenguer, Doc Ethel Pineda, Professor Van Ibernas, and Mark Lopez. So, manood po kayo. Tomorrow is Professor Van Ibernas on his turn in the program. So, thank you po and good night.
Thank you. Maraming salamat.
Thank you, Orion. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Pugad Vloggers.